Katie Wilson and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. New Ukraine talks will take place in Abu Dhabi this week, according to the Kremlin. Gaza's Rafah border crossing has reopened for limited traffic after 2 years of closure. And Iran's supreme leader warns any US attack would spark a regional war. Thanks for joining us. The Kremlin says the next round of US-brokered trilateral talks involving Russia and Ukraine will take place in Abu Dhabi from February 4th to 5th. The announcement came after earlier plans for talks were postponed. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the sides have narrowed differences on some matters but have made less progress on more complex issues. He described the negotiations as difficult, while noting that Moscow has received generally positive assessments of recent Russia-US discussions in Miami, which were described as productive overall. Meanwhile, a Russian drone attack has killed at least 12 people in southeastern Ukraine after a bus carrying mine workers was hit in the Dnipropetrovsk region on Sunday. Ukrainian officials say the strikes come as Russian attacks continue, despite claims of a pause on energy infrastructure targets.
At least 12 people have been killed after a Russian drone struck a bus in Ukraine's southeastern Dnipropetrovsk region. Footage shows the burned-out vehicle with its windows shattered. 7 others were injured. In his nightly address, President Volodymyr Zelensky offered his condolences to the families.
There was a strike by Russian drones on a regular coach carrying miners. Unfortunately, there are many dead. My condolences to all relatives and friends.
Ukraine's energy minister described the strike as a cynical and targeted attack on energy sector workers. Energy company DTEK confirmed all the victims were its employees returning from underground operations. The attack comes as Ukraine's energy system remains under severe strain this winter, following months of Russian strikes on power and heating infrastructure. Kiev says Russian attacks have continued despite Moscow's claim that it agreed to pause strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Earlier the same day, Ukrainian officials also reported injuries after strikes hit a maternity hospital and residential buildings in the city of Zaporizhzhia. US-brokered talks between Ukraine and Russia are scheduled to take place on the 4th and 5th of February in the United Arab Emirates.
Gaza's Rafah border crossing has reopened for limited traffic after more than 2 years of closure, officials have said. The move has been welcomed by Palestinians who hope for aid flow into the enclave.
Gaza's main border crossing at Rafah has resumed limited travel following months of near-total closure. Israeli officials said the crossing, which links Gaza with Egypt, has opened in both directions for residents travelling on foot only. Before the war in Gaza, Rafah was the enclave's primary exit point and a key entry route for humanitarian aid. It has been largely closed since May 2024. Palestinians in Gaza welcome the move, with some hoping it will allow more aid to enter, while others are waiting to leave the enclave for medical treatment abroad.
We are happy about the opening of the Rafah crossing, and God willing, it will open more so that everything we had lacking during the war can enter. We need more support in gas, food supplies, flour, medical syringes and everything. Tents, blankets, mattresses, everything. Thank God, we hope it opens even more and remains open, so we can forget the atmosphere of war that we still have not recovered from.
The opening of the Rafah crossing is also good news for us, because there is no treatment for children here, and nothing is available in the hospital. No equipment, no medicines, nothing is available in the hospital. Even my son's medication is not available in Gaza.
According to a Palestinian source, 50 Palestinians were expected to enter Gaza on the first day, where they will undergo stringent Israeli security checks, while a similar number would be allowed to leave. Gazan patients and family members gathered outside the Red Crescent Hospital in Khan Yunis in preparation for departure.
It feels like a dream, especially for my father. We had lost hope of him receiving treatment. Then they suddenly called us and told him to come to receive treatment and travel. This mechanism is a dream.
Thousands of Palestinians in Gaza have registered with the World Health Organization to travel for treatment. Gaza's health ministry said at least 20,000 patients, including children and cancer patients, are awaiting evacuation.
New disclosures in the Epstein case are creating fresh political shockwaves in Britain, with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer facing renewed scrutiny over links involving Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and a senior Labour figure. Our correspondent Zainab Farajzada has the details.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says King Charles' brother Prince Andrew should be prepared to testify before a US congressional committee, following new revelations about Andrew's links to the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. Starmer said anyone with information should be ready to share it, whatever form they are asked, adding that victims must be placed at the center of any process. The comments come after the US Justice Department released new files linked to Epstein, including emails suggesting Andrew remained in contact with him for more than 2 years after Epstein's conviction. The documents include exchanges discussing possible meetings and business-related contacts. In several emails, Epstein referred to women he proposed introducing to the prince. US lawmakers investigating the Epstein case have renewed calls for Andrew to answer questions. The disclosures have also prompted political fallout in Britain. Former government minister Peter Mandelson has resigned from Prime Minister Starmer's Labour Party, saying he did not want to cause further embarrassment because of his past connections to Epstein. British media, citing the Justice Department files, reported allegations that Epstein made payments to Mandelson in 2003 and 2004. Claims Mandelson has said are false and that he will investigate. Mandelson was dismissed as Britain's ambassador to the United States last year, following earlier scrutiny over his relationship with Epstein. On Friday, the US Justice Department released around 3 million pages, 180,000 images and 2,000 videos linked to Jeffrey Epstein. This is the largest release so far, following a law passed last year requiring the documents to be made public. The files include emails between Epstein and a number of high-profile figures. Slovakia's Prime Minister National Security Advisor Miroslav Lajčák was also named. He resigned after new files show that he and Epstein exchanged messages discussing women. He denies any wrongdoing. Some of the documents mention prominent figures including President Donald Trump, former President Bill Clinton, and billionaire Elon Musk. The identity of French President Emmanuel Macron had also drawn attention. His name appears in several documents from before and after his election in 2017. The record suggests Epstein claimed that Macron sought his help on various matters. The French presidency has not commented on the documents. The latest release comes 6 weeks after the Justice Department missed a deadline set by a law signed by President Trump, which required all Epstein-related documents to be made public. Zainab Farajzada, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
President Trump said on Sunday that Washington is in talks with Cuba's leadership to reach a deal. His comments come just days after he threatened Cuba's struggling economy with what he described as a virtual oil blockade.
Well, Cuba's a failing nation. It has been for a long time, but now it doesn't have Venezuela to prop it up. So we're talking to the people from Cuba, the highest people in Cuba, to see what happens. I want the people that came here that were horribly treated by Cuba to be taken care of, to be able to go back and do what they have to do. They have their family there. They haven't been able to see them in years, many, many years. So I think we're going to make a deal with Cuba.
President Trump, back to Brexit.
It's in bad shape. Cuba's in bad shape. Cuba has a humanitarian problem.
China has executed 4 senior members of the Bai family criminal network, which operated out of northern Myanmar, for offences including murder, telecom fraud and drug trafficking. That's according to state broadcaster CCTV. In November 2025, 5 leading figures in the group were sentenced to death. One of those died following the initial verdict, while the remaining 4 were executed by a court in Shenzhen, according to the Supreme Court. A spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that significant results have been achieved in tackling cross-border telecom and online fraud. Now, gearing up for the 2026 Winter Olympics, athletes are beginning to settle into life at the Olympic Village in Milan. With competition just days away, early arrivals say the atmosphere is positive as preparations step up ahead of the Milano Cortina Games.
Athletes from around the world have begun arriving at the Olympic Village in Milan as final preparations get underway for the Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Games. The village, located in the heart of the city, will be home to around 1,700 athletes during the Games. It offers a full range of facilities designed to help competitors train, recover and relax, including a fully equipped gym, wellness areas, briefing rooms and even a dedicated gaming zone. Built on a former railway yard, the village is part of a major urban regeneration project. Organisers say sustainability was a key focus, with plans already in place for the site to be converted into student housing once the Olympics conclude. Inside, athletes are settling into modern bedrooms and shared living spaces. A large canteen serves international cuisine, while lounges, bars and common areas provide opportunities to socialise. Wellness spaces, including a so-called mind zone, are available for mental preparation and recovery. Balconies and windows are now lined with national flags, adding to the growing Olympic atmosphere as teams arrive from across the globe. The Winter Games will be jointly hosted by Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo, one of Italy's most famous alpine resorts, and will run from February 6th to 22nd. Early arrivals say the mood inside the village is upbeat, as athletes begin to settle in and turn their focus toward competition.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a nice village. Everything is working. It's beautiful. Yeah, except the buildings around. But this is a good example for how it all can be. It's really nice. The food is good. The beds are good. We have enough space. So we are happy.
Time being on the Olympic Games, and really I enjoy here. The atmosphere is really nice. The campus is also really just a fresh new one, renovated probably inside, and yeah, that's it. So we just get in. We are trying to accommodate everything step by step, and hope we're gonna enjoy with everything together.
Yeah, sure, because it was during COVID, so now we're gonna be, with all the crowd and the families are there, so it's gonna be great.
With the opening ceremony just days away, attention now turns to competition as athletes make their final preparations.
Looks nice, doesn't it? We'll take a short break now. Right after the break, we'll discuss the reopening of the Rafah crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Palestinians have started to enter the Rafah border crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt after it reopened for the movement of people. Joining us now to discuss the significance of this is Senior Editor of Issue Insight, John Kavalik. Thank you for joining us, John. Now, what difference will this make on the ground, finally, the reopening of this crossing?
I have to be hesitant to even call it an opening. It's not even a trickle. You have, when you visualize this, you have a piece of territory, half of which the government of Israel controls. So they took 2.3 million that were in all of it, pushed them into half of it. And then the Israelis have said, well, even within those areas, some of them are off limits. And now we're going to allow 150 people to leave each day and 50 to come back. So it tells you an awful lot about how Israel sees this. First, they see it as an export opportunity, not as an import opportunity. They want 3 times the number out that they allow to come back in. And the next is the restrictions that they put on in terms of the humanitarian vehicles, the ambulances, who can come with family members. It doesn't show that Israel in any way wants to give up any control whatsoever of Gaza.
And you talk about those really heavy restrictions. How are aid agencies reacting to this? Is this opening coming anywhere close to what's needed?
No, not even. It's single-digit percentages versus 100%. I mean, they're not even. They're 1-2%, and in some of these cases, it's not about the numbers. It's about the issues. Some of these children have dire medical issues, and that has been just unavailable to them for not months, not weeks, not months, years. And even now, Israel we need to inspect the ambulances. We need to check the credentials of the doctors. We need to check what people are taking with them. We need to check what people are bringing in with them. We need to make certain that this child is the one. And then what happens when the child hopefully is treated, gets better, wants to come home? Oh no, I'm sorry, that was a one-way ticket.
So on the ground, is it making any tangible difference? Obviously, this is being hailed as, the reopening. On the ground, does it feel that way?
From the individuals that are on the ground that share with me, and like many, we don't have the opportunity because the government of Israel restricts who can go in. And so it's left to people that have cell phones and have batteries, have chargers that they can get information out. And no one that I've heard from directly, and no one that I've talked to who have heard from people directly or indirectly, who are far more engaged than I am, have said that this is a great day, that they're applauding the Israeli Defense Forces, that they're applauding Prime Minister Netanyahu for moving from phase 1 to phase 2, and we're on the cusp of phase 3. They're all disgusted, they're all demoralized, and they just don't see a path to any kind of what most people would perceive as justice for the Palestinian people.
And you mentioned sort of that diplomatic level. In terms of that bigger peace process, how significant is this day in that sense?
It could have and should have been rather substantial, because if everything in phase 1 had been completed, then we would march toward phase 2. But what has happened is that phase 1 and phase 2 were sort of merged together. Basically, Israel taking the least offensive that they could accept, Hamas taking the least offensive that they could accept. But other than all of the bodies of the hostages, as far as how this benefits 0.3 million people in Gaza, I think that they're still waiting to see how it does. Because as you noted, at the diplomatic level, you do have diplomats high-fiving each other. Oh, a great day. We have Steve Witkoff, who is President Trump's golfing buddy, who is the special envoy for Russia and for Israel. He's going back, and more and more when you see pictures of him, he's got this sort of this grin on his face, and it suggests it's the type of grin that someone has when they have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what the outcome's going to be, and they're just sort of happy to have people smile and take their picture. So not a lot of optimism.
And what about among Netanyahu and his government? Have we had any reaction from them?
Thus far, they have said we are doing what we said we're going to do, which they're not, but that's what they're saying. And they will continue to do what the phases require as long as Hamas, Palestinian Authority, do what they're supposed to do, And then we get to defining what that means. And that's one of the problems with the wording in the agreement, is that it's all open to interpretation. So where you and I might read a piece of paper that says, person will go through door, close door. Now we go to the next chapter. These diplomats will look and say, okay, person went through the door, closed the door. But did they really close the door? Did they mean to close the door? Maybe they didn't lock the door. Maybe it's not the same door we were talking about before. And that's what happens every hour of every day. And the Palestinians, the Gazans that are, those 2.3 million that are held hostage in there, that's what they're seeing. They see, these elaborate discourses. They see these elaborate celebrations. They see everyone saying that they're doing what they're supposed to do and that good is coming soon, and the good doesn't come. And then when something happens, it's like what we saw today, which is 2.3 million in, 50 can leave. I'm sorry, 150 can leave, 50 can come back. And that doesn't give a lot of optimism to anyone.
And in terms of whether this crossing will stay open, do you see this as something that the government might roll back on, or is this a concrete step into opening, even if it is in small numbers?
Nothing with respect to Israel and Gaza is concrete. Everything is putting styrofoam, anything that's soft, Jello, but nothing's in concrete. Israel will shut down Rafah again. Egypt may shut down Rafah again. And then you get into the whole, the issue of the Muslim community, where are they in saying that they're going to allow Israel to do this? Where is the robustness of their response? So, right now, if you're keeping score, Israel's winning. Israel's getting more of what it wants, and it is giving up less of what it doesn't want. And so I think anyone would be delusional to believe that the Rafah crossing will remain open, that there will not be some reason that the Israeli government and then the Israeli Defense Forces come up with a reason that they need to slow it down, they need to check more credentials. And unfortunately, there is only one result when that happens: further suffering of 2.3 million Palestinians.
And what about the White House? How do you think they're viewing this? Do you think they view this as the next step in this plan? And whereabouts are we in this wider peace plan?
The challenge with the wider peace plan, if we're talking about you're just moving from phase to phase, 20 points, so to speak, we're moving at such a slow pace that on the one hand, it's very easy to measure because everything's moving so slowly. On the other hand, it's very difficult to measure because everything's moving so slowly. From the White House position, the Trump-Vance administration, they have a challenge where you still have people getting killed every day in Gaza. And it's not Hamas that are shooting Palestinians. It's Israeli Defense Forces that are killing Palestinians. And the administration really doesn't care. And they show that, they demonstrate that by, Mr. Hoff's going there, I believe, tomorrow to see Prime Minister Netanyahu. But you don't see him. I think he went into Gaza once, just near one of the crossings with our U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, and he was wearing black. He looked like a ninja or something. It wasn't someone who was wanting to go in and learn something. It's sort of like he's on a field trip and he can leave at any time. So the Trump-Vance administration, as far as the president's concerned, he, quote, brought peace, and the rest of this can just go and muddle along, and he's fine with that. And I think Mr. Witkoff, Jared Kushner, they're in the same position where the president's attention span is not great. So he'll focus on Iran, he'll focus on Syria, he'll focus on Russia, focus on Cuba, focus on Venezuela, and they're basically going to go wherever. And lastly, I'll say that what they're benefiting from, many people care about the Palestinians. Muslim heads of state, Muslim heads of government are doing nothing that would damage the state of Israel, that would truly cause the state of Israel to say, wow, I guess we better behave ourselves. They're not willing to do it. European Union's not interested. And so the Palestinians just don't get a lot of attention, and that helps Israel, helps the White House, doesn't help the Palestinians.
Always great to get your insights, John. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Welcome back to A News. Now, let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev met with UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in Abu Dhabi, highlighting the strategic partnership between the two countries. The leaders discussed expanding cooperation in politics, economic, energy, culture and defence. During the visit, agreements were signed on defence cooperation and a stake sale in the Southern Gas Corridor, while both sides emphasised the importance of joint military exercises and future collaboration. Iran's supreme leader has warned that any attack on the country could spark a regional conflict. It comes after President Trump sent military forces to the Middle East. The European Union has designated Iran's IRGC as a terrorist organisation, prompting Tehran to respond with threats against the armed forces of all EU member states.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, says that any attack on the country could trigger a regional conflict. Iran also announced it is in a state of full military readiness. Deputy Commander of the IRGC, Ahmad Vahidi, says the armed forces are better prepared than during the 12-day conflict in June, and that all potential enemy movements are being closely monitored. The comments made on Sunday comes after the US announced it had deployed aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln to the region, with Central Command confirming its operations in the Arabian Sea. However, Iran's supreme leader says Tehran won't be intimidated.
The Americans have threatened us repeatedly in the past, saying all options are on the table, which includes the option of war. They've always said these things. Similarly, this person, Donald Trump, constantly claims they've brought warships. But the Iranian nation shall not be intimidated by these things. The Iranian people will not be stirred by these threats.
US President Donald Trump dismissed warnings of a potential regional conflict.
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
On Friday, senior US and Israeli military officials held a closed-door meeting at the Pentagon, while Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz met Zamir to review operational readiness. Last week, the EU designated Iran's IRGC as a terrorist organization and imposed sanctions on 15 officials and 6 entities covering 247 individuals and 50 organizations. In response, Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said Tehran would treat the armed forces of all EU member states as terrorist groups, with the consequences shared collectively.
Staying in Iran, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran and Washington are at a fateful juncture and he is hopeful of a fair and equitable agreement. It comes as Iran's supreme leader warned that a US invasion would spill over into a regional conflict.
Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi said he was hopeful of a fair and equitable agreement with the United States, as both sides are at a fateful point in time. He made the comment in a post on X social platform on Sunday, after Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei warned that if US starts a war with Iran, it will be a regional war. Ayatollah Khamenei's statement was also made on Sunday in an address to mark the 47th anniversary of the victory of the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. Araghchi referred to his interview with CNN TV channel over the weekend, in which he said a fair and equitable agreement was achievable to ensure no nuclear weapons and in a short period of time. However, he cautioned that there may also be miscalculation and aggression, saying that Iran is equally prepared for that scenario. Meantime, Iran's head of Supreme National Security Council, Ali Larijani, signaled progress on a framework for negotiations between Tehran and Washington. In a post on his X account, after visiting Moscow last week, he wrote that, contrary to the artificially manufactured media war narrative, the formation of a framework for negotiations is progressing. In the latest bid to avert a military standoff with US, Foreign Minister Araghchi held phone talks with his Egyptian, Turkish, and Saudi counterparts. According to official sources on Monday, quoting the Foreign Ministry, they discussed latest regional developments amid rising tensions between Tehran and Washington. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi are expected to meet on Friday in Istanbul to discuss a possible nuclear deal. That's according to Axios. A source said the meeting is a best-case scenario, stressing that it is not yet confirmed. If it goes ahead, this would be the first direct meeting between US and Iranian officials since talks collapsed and the brief war last June. The expected talks come amid a major US military build-up in the Gulf, as President Trump warns that a swift deal is the only way to avoid conflict. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and Kazakhstan's Foreign Minister have reaffirmed the growing strategic partnership between their countries. That was during high-level talks in Ankara. Co-chairing the 8th meeting of the Joint Strategic Planning Group, Fidan welcomed the strong political dialogue and expanding cooperation in trade, investment and energy. Both sides emphasised the goal of boosting trade to $15 billion, strengthening cooperation within the Organisation of Turkic States and advancing the Trans-Caspian Middle Corridor. Georgia's parliament is advancing another legislative package that reshapes the balance between independent institutions and the executive branch. This time, the focus is on the Legal Aid Service, a body established to provide free legal assistance and operate independently from political power.
Parliament has already adopted amendments in the first reading that fundamentally change how Georgia's legal aid service is governed and to whom it is accountable. Under the adopted changes, the legal aid service no longer reports to Parliament. Instead, it becomes accountable to the Prime Minister. The head of the service is required to submit annual reports directly to the Prime Minister, who is also granted the authority to appoint and dismiss the director. Until now, the Legal Aid Service has operated as an independent body, insulated from direct political control. Its governing council has included representatives from the Bar Association, the Public Defender, and the judiciary. A structure intended to balance interests and safeguard institutional autonomy. The amendments significantly altered this model. The Legal Aid Council is reduced from 9 to 7 members, most of whom hold political or executive positions by virtue of their offices. Their terms are tied to their political tenure rather than the fixed mandates. The legislation also establishes a defined transition timeline. The current director's term is set to end in May 2026 with compensation, while the existing council is to be dissolved a month earlier. The newly formed council is required to nominate a director within 2 weeks for appointment by the Prime Minister. Georgian Dream MPs voted in favor of the amendments during the first reading, with no opposing votes. Responding to criticism, ruling party representatives dismissed claims that the changes undermine judicial or institutional independence. They argue that the reform strengthens constitutional safeguards, addresses potential risks, and aims to optimize resources and management efficiency within the legal aid service. However, critics point to a broader legislative pattern. Over the past year, several reforms have expanded executive influence over institutions previously designed to operate independently, raising concerns about long-term checks and balances. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
At least 145 militants were killed in the Pakistan province of Balochistan on Sunday after coordinated gun and bomb attacks. The banned Baloch Liberation Army claimed responsibility for the assaults. Here's more on that report.
Pakistani security forces say they killed at least 145 militants during a 40-hour counter-operation, according to provincial officials on Sunday. The action followed a wave of coordinated gun and bomb attacks across the southwestern province of Balochistan. Security forces say they launched sweeping clearance operations across the province, sealing off multiple sites and increasing patrols. The attacks, among the deadliest in years, targeted civilians and infrastructure in several districts. Authorities say 17 security personnel and at least 31 civilians were killed.
Yesterday, BLA people came and broke the windows and doors and entered inside. Then they hit me on the eye and head. Then they told us to take off our uniforms and leave. So we took off our uniforms and were thrown out of the bank.
The banned separatist group Baloch Liberation Army claimed responsibility, saying it carried out a coordinated operation dubbed Black Storm. Pakistan's government accused India of backing the rebels, a claim Delhi denies. Balochistan, Pakistan's largest and poorest province, has faced a decades-long insurgency led by ethnic Baloch separatists demanding greater autonomy and a larger share of the region's natural resources.
Afghanistan and Turkmenistan are signalling fresh momentum on major regional energy and transport projects following high-level talks in the western city of Herat. The focus is on pipelines, railways, electricity and new foreign investment. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
The Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs of Afghanistan, Abdul Ghani Brother, has met Turkmenistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Rashid Mirdov in Herat, discussing a broad package of economic cooperation. According to a statement from the Deputy Prime Minister's office, talks covered trade and banking cooperation, alongside major regional projects including the TAPI and TAP pipelines, railway connectivity and electricity transmission. Brother announced that an Arab firm, Delta International Group, has expressed interest in investing in the TAPI gas pipeline project. He said the company is looking at purchasing gas under TAPI, expanding Turkmenistan's gas production capacity and constructing and extending the pipeline from Herat's Guzara district through Kandahar's Spin Boldak, with plans to extend it further to the Indian border. Brother also urged Turkmenistan to clarify its position on the Torghundi-Herat railway project, noting that Kazakhstan has already shown strong interest in implementing the line. He added that Afghanistan is fully prepared to finalize the roadmap for the TAP project. In response, Turkmenistan's foreign minister said his country is ready to invest in the Torghundi-Herat railway, confirming that practical work has already begun in Torghundi. He also stated that Turkmenistan's prepared to supply electricity to Afghanistan through 5 transmission routes and increase export capacity. The TAPI pipeline linking Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India has long been viewed as a cornerstone regional energy project, though security and financing challenges have delayed progress for years. Afghanistan sees both TAPI and expanded rail links as key to boosting transit revenues, regional trade, and long-term economic stability. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Climate pressures across Central Asia are intensifying as governments warn that growing water shortages could soon threaten agriculture, major cities and regional stability. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova from Tashkent has more.
Central Asia is facing worsening water shortages as climate change, population growth and aging infrastructure place growing strain on the region's limited water resources. In Kazakhstan, authorities predict a deficit of up to 1 billion cubic meters of irrigation water for the 2026 growing season, based on forecasts by the government's Water Coordination Commission. Kyrgyzstan is also reporting declining reservoir levels, with water shortage in the Toktogul reservoir recently measured about 1.6 billion cubic meters lower than last year's figures, raising concerns about irrigation and electricity production. The situation is also acute in Uzbekistan, where low river inflows last year reduced hydropower output by about 20%. Experts estimate that such deficit already cost the country around $5 billion annually due to lost agricultural and energy output. Analysts say causes include declining precipitation, melting glaciers, and inefficient irrigation networks that lose significant volumes of water. Without stronger regional cooperation and investment in modern water-saving infrastructure, authorities warn that supplies for cities and farms may further tighten in the coming years. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
We'll take a short break now. Right after the break, we will discuss the diplomatic push for talks between the US and Iran in Istanbul. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, as we discussed earlier, Egypt, Turkey and Qatar were working to organise a meeting between White House envoy Steve Witkoff and senior Iranian officials. Well, according to sources of Axios, Witkoff is to meet Araghchi this Friday in Istanbul. Joining us now to discuss this is Bekir İlhan from the Turkey Research Foundation. Thank you for being with us. Now, we're hearing that this meeting is going to be set for Friday. In your view, how realistic is it that this meeting will actually take place?
Yeah, first of all, I need to say that, yes, we are at a very critical moment right now. The military option from the United States is on the table, and there is a huge military buildup in the region right now. But I still believe that for sure there is a path, or there is a still ground for diplomacy, I would say. And as you said, that the U.S. Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff will meet Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi in Istanbul, and I still believe that there will be some diplomatic results, because the military option also is risky for the United States. And for regional countries, I would say Turkey is also seeking stability in the region, and Turkey has clearly indicated that it will not endorse any kind of military intervention to Iran. And it's not about just Iran. You know, Turkey, in principle, is against any kind of great power intervention to the region, I would say. And also, Turkey has a very important diplomatic experience, I would say, because we have seen it in the talks between the Russian side and Ukraine, and there is Istanbul peace talks, And regarding the meeting between the Iranian regime and the United States, I believe that there is still a way for peace, and there is still a way for a diplomatic, efforts, I would say. And for sure, we will see how it develops.
And why now? What's behind the diplomatic push to make this meeting happen now?
Like I said, a military intervention, is against the interests of the regional powers like, Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt, I would say. And for sure, there will be oil prices, gets higher, and also there will be another refugee crisis, especially for Turkey, I would say. On the other hand, if the United States attacks Iran, Iran will likely to attack American airbase in the Qatar territory. I would say for that reasons, I would say, military operation, does not seem a viable path for Iran nuclear issue. I would say, like I said, it's all against the interest of Turkey, Qatar, and other regional powers as well. And like I said, it's also a riskier option for the United States. Of course, the United States has the capacity to strike Iran for sure. But after the military operation, you will not or you cannot calculate what's going to happen in the country. I would say, because Iran is a very diverse and a very interesting country, because a fragmented Iran and unstable Iran will likely, create more instability for the region. And for sure, the Iranian leaders, especially, Ali Khamenei, this time threatened the United States, that if the United States attacks Iran, this time there will be a regional war. And the Iranian regime has its own proxies across the region, and this time Iran is also, clearly or strongly signals that there will be a harsh response this time. And like I said, the military option, as for the execution of this operation, I think it's easy for the United States, but after the military operation, I would say there will be more crisis in the region.
Now, we've not had official responses from either Tehran or Washington, but do we have a sense of how they're reacting to the prospect of this meeting on Friday?
Well, first of all, we need to clarify that, in this crisis, Iranian regime, the Iranian side is the weaker side. And comparing to the military capacity of the United States and Iran, I believe that Iran has no chance of resisting the United States military power. And of course, the Iranian regime has a very huge ballistic missile capacity. That's true. And we saw it during the 12 days war against Israel. That's true. But, this time the United States is preparing very harshly, and they deployed a very important military power in the region. And in case of a military attack, I would say the United States will likely destroy the Iranian military capacity and maybe the Iranian regime itself. But for now, I would say Iran needs more diplomacy, and Iranian side is the weaker side. And on the other hand, the United States, knowing that the Iranian side is the weaker side in this crisis, they have a very maximalist demand list. For example, the United States demands Iran to, totally, completely abandon its nuclear activities, I would say, because the United States has a very certain and has a very strong condition for that. They have a zero enrichment policy, and they impose it to Iran. On the other hand, the United States also want Iran to degrade or stop its military or ballistic missile capacity, I would say. Yes, like I said, the United States has the maximalist side at this point. And, in the international relations, there is a saying that the strong do whatever they want to do, and the weaker sides, suffer what they suffer. But, it's the cold reality of the international politics, I would say. And that's why I'm saying that Iran needs the diplomatic efforts. Iran needs a peaceful solution for this time, I would say.
And let's stick on Iran, as obviously this comes after widespread protests across the country. What impact has that had on the diplomatic push for talks, do you think?
First of all, the protests in Iran, should be Iran's domestic affair, I would say. Of course, it's not the business of Turkey to intervene in Iranian domestic affairs. It's not the business of the United States to intervene in the Iranian domestic affairs. But this is, this should be in principle. But we know that the United States, especially the Trump administration, has warned Iran not to execute the protesters. And there are reports that the Iranian regime executed some protesters. And for that reason, I would say Trump regime or Trump administration will likely, strike Iran. But at least I would say the military option on the table for this reason, because Trump will not want to, he will want to realize his promise. He will just want to, deliver his promise, because he made a public promise, because it's very important. So, for example, Obama, just remember that he warned the Assad regime in 2013 to not to use chemical weapons, and then Assad regime used chemical weapons, but the United States, did not strike the Assad regime at this time, and Trump himself, criticized Obama administration at this time. And for this time, Trump will not want to fall in the same situation, and that's why he made a public commitment regarding this. And for that reason, I would say Trump has very strong individual motivations to strike Iran. But like I said, it's also a risky option for sure. The United States government is also, evaluating the risks and the advantages of such a strike for now. And regarding the protests, I would say it should be the domestic affairs of Iran. Either it's justified or unjustified. People have their demands, and people took the streets, and it should be just between the Iranian regime and its people. But right now we are just dealing with a regional crisis since the United States, since the Trump administration, made a public commitment regarding this.
Thank you very much. It's certainly one to watch ahead of Friday, isn't it? Thank you for joining us on the programme and for providing your
insights.
Thank
you. Have a good night. Thank you.
Well, that's the news for the hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for watching.